You're listening to Street Life, a podcast about street photography with John ST and Mark Davidson.
You're listening to Street Life. I'm Mark Davidson, a street photographer from Melbourne, Australia. And with me, as he always is, Mr. Optimus Prime Lens, a man who's transformed the Sydney street photography scene, my mate, Mr. John ST. How you doing? Don't look at me like that.
I'm doing really well, thanks, dad joke, Mark. How are you doing? You don't even have any goddamn kids, mate. You're rolling this shit out every week. This is great. Well done.
I'm good,
Is
man.
it you or is it
What?
ChatGPT that's creating this shit?
No, it's all me, mate. It's all me. This brilliance is,
Great. I can't wait to see the quote book come out. That'll be awesome. I'm going to put it on my list to buy.
How you been, mate? Anyway, all good?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, pretty busy. Just went and got a roller film developed today and running around town and, nothing as usual. But no, other than that, all good.
So you're broke?
Broke? Oh, man, it's getting so expensive, isn't it? It's just, I've only sort of just started doing film and, it's $20 to develop, if you're shooting colour. Well, I'm shooting a lot of black and white, but colour's, $30 a roll. It's like, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Living crisis, not for Mark Davidson, people. He doesn't give a shit. He can afford to buy film and process it now. His kids losing their homes, mate. They can't afford to put the telly on.
Interest rates going up,
Interest rates.
Coffees are $5.90 in Melbourne at the moment. It's crazy, but keep shooting film, everyone.
Oh, well, whatever works for you. Good for you, Mark. Well done. It's good to see one of the people in Australia is doing well.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I've got some more show and tell. I feel like we need a theme tune.
Put it away, Mark, for the love of God. No one wants to see that.
Not like that.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, it's only for our private messages. Okay, no worries.
But, no.
Don't show yourself to the wrong person, Mark. You could be cancelled.
Hey.
Anyway, go on.
No, this arrived in the mail today, and
What have you got?
It's quite apt, actually, because our guest who's on the line is waiting to chat to us, but I've got...
On the line?
Nuts Tokyo's zine just arrived in the paper, so he's from Japan.
Wow, that looks bloody nice, doesn't it?
It's very nice. Yusuke
Film
Nagata.
and zines every 5 minutes. Jesus Christ, you're rolling in dough. Oh, what? Yeah, beautiful. Give us a flick through, Mark.
And I love it. He's got his contact sheets at the back too, which is kind of cool. It's really
That's a nice little thing, isn't it?
And it's a really good story. He sort of did a road trip up north to Hokkaido, where his family are from, and it's really nice. Really good work. If you want to go and check it out, Nuts Tokyo on Instagram. Look him up and buy his zine. It's really nice.
How did you find him, Mark?
How did I find him? Well, I ran into him in Tokyo. Well, I was actually following him previously, but I went to Tokyo in April and ran into him on the Shibuya crossing, as I did with our guest, who's coming up in just a moment. But they were hitting the streets and had a bit of a chat with him, and he's a lovely lad.
That's wonderful, mate. Well done, you.
Another one. Joel Pulliam's zine arrived too. He's got a new zine out called Slopes, which is great. It's photographed around his neighbourhood in Tokyo, which is awesome. So it's a bit of a Japanese flavour on the podcast today.
Somebody else posted that up on their stories the other day that they got Joel's zine.
Yeah.
And they said it was down to us. And our interview, they never knew who Joel was.
Oh, there you go.
So it was Street Life Podcast, taking over the world, mate.
Lovely lad. No, he's good. And some really nice work. Joel, he's perfected this really quiet photography in Japan. It's really nice. It's sort of documenting the neighbourhood around where he lives, and I love it. So you should check that out, Johnny.
Did he use the technique that he spoke about in the podcast, where he was going to use multiple cameras at different angles at the same time?
No, not for this one. Just a traditional one camera. So it's called Slopes because I think where he lives it's quite hilly, and he walks uphill every day or downhill and photographs the hills on the way home from his commute. So it's nice work.
Wonderful, good for you.
Anyway,
that's great.
Sorry, that's our guest. You might hear in the background. So we've kept him waiting long enough. You might
hurry up. I'm going.
he's like a kid on what is it, ADD or whatever. Anyway, all right then. Today, we'll better bang on, because he's getting a bit testy. Look at him. Today, we're joined by Jonny Dub. He's an award-winning street photographer originally from Manchester in the UK, but is now currently living in Tokyo, Japan. He's a member of the Tokyo Street Photography Club, and last year self-published his first zine titled Kaiko. Jonny is known for getting up close and personal on the street and his use of flash photography. He uses both digital and analog cameras to capture and document the frantic, fast-paced streets of his adopted home. In 2022, Jonny was awarded first place in the Smithsonian Magazine Awards and has been a finalist in the Paris International Street Photography Awards. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Jonny to the Street Life Podcast. Thanks for joining us, Jonny.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Hey, Jonny, thank you so much for talking to us. I ran into you in the streets of Tokyo on the Shibuya crossing early this year, and it was great chatting to you. So awesome seeing you again.
For sure.
Just want to ask you, tell us a little bit about your journey. We know you're from Manchester originally, now you live in Tokyo. So I know you were heavily involved in the music scene, and I think you're even a DJ. So how did you make that transition from music to photography?
So it's kind of a bit of a weird one, I guess. Historically, my father, first of all, he's a photographer. He's a commercial photographer and advertising photographer. So from a very young age, I grew up basically in a studio. Be there all the time. I'd be loading old film backs and helping out. As I got a little bit older, I'd help as an assistant. Just for the bit of pocket money kind of thing. And so I got to spend a lot of time in that photographic environment, and to be honest, it really put me off it. I found it to be incredibly boring, and I was one of the things my parents were really good at when we were young is they always encouraged us to do creative things. I was never academic, neither my brother or my sister. We weren't academia types, but we were always really creative. So we were good at art and music and theatre, everything creative. That's what we loved doing. So as I said, I spent a lot of time helping out in the studio, and I just didn't really enjoy being there too much. I didn't find it that interesting. Ironically, years later, I've become really interested in photography, and I realized part of the reason I didn't really enjoy it was because I was just kind of a Joey. I had no creative input. It was just move that, paint that, shift that, make the tees kind of thing. There was nothing creative on my side. In hindsight, again, I wish I could go back and pay a bit more attention, to be honest, because, it's something that I would love to do now. Now I'm more into it. But anyway, during that time, I started to get more involved into music. Through hip hop culture, really. This was kind of the mid 90s. Got some turntables and I just taught myself how to DJ. And obviously Manchester, I don't know if people are aware, it's a big party city. I mean, it's known for, the nightclub, the Hacienda, that's where that's from, and the acid house scene in the UK, and everything to do with Manchester. The music is in culture at its core, really. So I think growing up in Manchester, I just gravitated towards music, but it wasn't. But the weird thing was, again, it wasn't just music. I started getting into DJing, and I wanted to play at parties, and no one would book me, so I started to put my own little parties on. And then off the back of that, I was really into art and drawing as well. So I decided to do this Sunday afternoon, live art drawing event, basically, and that kind of exploded. That in fact they actually started doing them in Melbourne years later under the same name, because one of the girls who was from Melbourne, she lived there, and she took the concept over there as well. That was called Sketch City, and that was just a live art music jam, and we'd bring guests over to perform music. There'd be DJs and all this kind of stuff, and then from that then sort of naturally developed into this kind of creative agency. And at the time it was very street art focused, and street art was a kind of new concept, even though it had been around for years as graffiti. It was in the 90s it started to kind of transition a little bit more into kind of a commercial thing, and so again, through this process of doing this event, all of a sudden people, it'd be brands would contact us and say, we hear you've got artists, we want people to come and do an in-store live art thing, or we want art design for this new product kind of thing. So I developed, along with a couple of other people I was running it with, we did corporate jobs, we did community projects. I developed this whole series of community outreach programs where we'd go into neighborhoods and we'd take spray paints and things like that. And so on, and that kind of grew into something, and I was really lucky. Won some awards doing that as well at the time. And then during this process, me and one of the other guys who was involved with it, we decided we'd just set up our own club night. So it'd gone from DJing in bars to doing this kind of live art event to actually doing a club night. And that club night was called Hoya Hoya. And that ran for about 8 or 9 years and was, really successful. We got to do it all over, festivals in Croatia. We had a residency at Fabric, a big club in London with Hoya Hoya. So the whole time I'd kind of moved into, much more into the music world. And then eventually being involved in an actual music project called Levels, which was just a crazy Mancunian kind of rap band, basically. I don't know how to best. We were once described as a mix between the Wu-Tang Clan and the Happy Mondays, which I kind of thought was like the most perfect thing because it was just this wild kind of feral group of guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like I say, it was kind of creativity across all kind of areas, And I was during this period, I'd also studied design at college. I'd gone on and studied music. I'd studied film, and so I'd done all these kind of little different areas of creativity. And yeah, it wasn't until I kind of finally ended up years and years later, 18 years, I moved to Japan, that I actually picked up photography for myself, really. And I think that was just kind of getting to Tokyo. I wasn't DJing as much anymore. I kind of felt a yearning to do something creative, and I was just so inspired by the city and the people out here. I mean, Mark, because you've been here, what it's like. It's just this assault, a 360 scope of every direction. It's incredible. Yeah. And so, yeah, I decided I'd pick up a camera and start taking photos, and I've never looked back really since. It's definitely become, it started slowly for me. I kind of started getting into it, and it took a while, but then once I found my feet, it kind of became almost an obsession after that. So that's 20 something years kind of summed up into like a few minutes.
Well, John, I know you've got a question, but I just want to ask quickly. So, I mean, I obviously was introduced to you via your photography work, but listening to you now, it sounds like you were so ensconced in the music world and DJing, and you're so passionate. Was it difficult to leave all that behind? I don't know if you have totally, but I think I see sometimes on Instagram you're doing a few little events and bits and pieces, but obviously it was a huge passion for you. Was it sort of difficult to move on from that world?
Yes and no. I think... So when it'd been such a huge part of my life for the best part of 18 years, but at the same time, especially with DJing, I had like a modicum of success, I wasn't, world famous, obviously. Otherwise we'd be sat talking about, DJing and things like that instead of photography. But, I had enough success to get to travel around the world a bit and, played in Australia and America and New Zealand and, all kinds of places, which was great. But at the same time, the gigs weren't regular enough to, have a great life off. So I'd often have to do lots of bar gigs and, I'd have to compromise like my musical tastes and things that I wanted to do in order with things that I needed to do so that I didn't have to go and get a day job. Do you know what I mean? Because it was kind of pretty full time for me for a long time. And I think over that course of time, my passion for it kind of slowly faded. And, it was a difficult thing. You're constantly living, it's like feast or famine. Sometimes the things are great, sometimes they're not so great. And again, you're getting older, music changing, all of a sudden you're that mid 30-year-old in a club kind of thing. And it's a young people's environment and, and everything kind of changes. And so, on one hand, the transition felt quite natural. It felt like, okay, moving to Japan, I ended up getting a job, I guess a normal job over in Japan where I work doing marketing for a tech startup over here. So it's kind of like going from this very free lifestyle of, parties and wild fun and creative stuff to kind of getting a more stable life over in Japan. And so I was kind of ready to take my foot off the gas there, ready to kind of put that to bed, if you like. And like I say, throughout that period, because I'd become a bit more jaded by it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I feel like I've had my fill. And so what the beauty of the photography for me was like, there was firstly like, because I have a day job, I wasn't worried about trying to earn money from it. It's like, this is just a hobby that I enjoy doing now. So it felt like I had no pressure to do it, and I'm not, there's no expectation on me off anyone. I'm not trying to deliver something to somebody. Do you know what I mean? I'm just enjoying going out and learning and experimenting and finding my way throughout this process for the sake of the fun of it. It's like there's no other reason I'm doing it. I just do it because I enjoy doing it. And that's been really, really refreshing, because before it's like I did it for so long because I needed to. to pay my bills. And now it's like, I do this, I pay my bills through my job. I do this just purely because I love it. And that's like, to me, it's just been an absolute breath of fresh air. And interestingly enough, it's like also switched my view back. Now I've had a break from music for a bit. I've kind of reapproached it now. I'm sort of relearning instruments and doing little bits of production and doing little DJ gigs here and there, but it's purely just for me, for fun, you know. So it's kind of in some ways kind of reignited my old passions for other areas of creativity. So yeah, it's been good.
But that's an interesting thing that you've brought up there, because a lot of, once you start doing photography for a while, like myself and Mark and yourself too, and you start getting half okay at it, people start to say, well, why don't you turn this into, you just mentioned a bit like a midlife crisis, and, you start getting older and you look at the world differently, and people go, well, if you don't like doing what you're doing now, because you loved your music before and you try to turn it into a career, to pay the bills, but then you have to supplement your income by doing things that you don't want to do. And that goes for photography as well, I guess. So have you not been tempted to?
No.
Sort of...
I've been offered some gigs as well. Like there was somebody they contacted me and they said, would I be interested in? They were like, oh, you used to be involved in nightclubs and stuff, and they're like, do you want to come and do this photo shoot? There's this girl DJ coming from the US, and she's kind of like a very Instagrammable kind of DJ, and I was just like, no, not for me. Not into the music. I don't want to just go and photograph for the sake of it. I'm just very fortunate that I do have a job that pays for this. But it's interesting what you just said, and it's a conversation that I've had with quite a few people over the years about how with the kind of the art and the creative world, it always seems like there's an expectation that if you invest money or time into learning how to, like, say, take photos, or you're in a band, or you're painting, the society always turns around and says, well, how are you going to monetize this? How are you going to make a career of this? Now, do you know what I mean? But if my hobby was fishing, for example, how often do you think a fisherman, they see you fishing and go, well, how are you going to earn a living off this?
Exactly.
You fish because you enjoy it. You do these things because you enjoy it. You go walking in the mountains. No one turns around to a hiker and say, well, how are you going to make money off this? With the creative industries, it's always like this expectation of, like, if you do this, you have to turn it into a hustle. Like, why can't you just do it because you enjoy it? And I'm certainly not saying that I would turn down money or opportunities for things that I was really interested in, but at the same time, it's like, that's not my reason for doing it. I mean, yes, obviously I'd love to get successful at it and be able to sell books and do shows and all this kind of thing, but it would be on my terms and exactly how I want to do it, and if I didn't get to that, I wouldn't feel like I just had to go on, I don't know, take photos at weddings or whatever. And there's nothing wrong in that, because some people love doing that, but for me, it's like my vision with what I want to do with this, it sits in this world, and I don't want to compromise this again, because it made me start to resent doing it in the past.
It's your creative outlet, Johnny.
Exactly.
And you don't want to monetize that, because it will you'll end up hating it and jaded, just like towards your music.
Exactly.
And that's sad when that happens, really, isn't it?
Totally. And the interesting thing, I've seen it with my dad. It's not that because he loves his job and he's very good at it. The fact that he's now, I think, in his mid-70s and he's still out there working, but outside of that, you never see him with a camera. He has no interest in it. To him, it's just a tool, it's a job, it's clients, and that's what he loves. He loves work, and like I say, he's been very successful at it throughout his life, which again is testament to his skill and his endurance in, specifically from someone who's gone from, the film era to the digital era to the post-digital era that we're in now with AI and everything like that. The fact that he's still out there, an old man going up, taking photos of trucks and whatever it is that he's doing. So yeah.
Well, Johnny, that's really interesting to hear you say all that. And so we know that you don't take photos for the money. So why do you go out and take photos on the street every weekend or however often you do?
I don't know, really. I think for me, it's, and because it's funny, because some people, when you ask them a question like that, they come with a very philosophical answer, about how, but for me, I just do it because I enjoy it. I enjoy the results that I can get. I also find that, particularly now that I tend to do a lot more flash stuff, I love the interactions that I have with people. I think flash photography is an interesting one because it's kind of a bit of a Marmite, kind of thing, where people either love it or they hate it. And I think it's definitely got a bad reputation. I've posted photos before, and I've had interactions with some people who watching me taking photos, and they said, should you be doing that? It's in a bit, kind of in people's faces or whatever. And I think sadly, because there's certain figures in the flash photography world, the more famous ones, who have what I would consider to be a more aggressive approach to the photography, and it's partly based on their personality, their upbringing, their location. That's how they have to be in order to get the work they do. Yeah, they see that, and then they assume that that's how everybody approaches it, and that it's some kind of ruthless, uncaring form of photography where you're going around and you're upsetting everybody that you're meeting. And for me, it's never been like that. I'm a very playful person, I'm very friendly, and when I take photos of people in the street with a flash, often our interactions are very healthy, and we have little conversations, we have fun. I think today's society, through social media and politics and everything like that, people are being slowly more and more divided. So I found the thing that I enjoy, which connects me with people. Now that I think about it, I just said, I don't really have a very philosophical, reason, but I guess I actually do, and I think it comes down to connections with people, honestly, more than anything.
Jonny, I can confirm exactly what you're saying, because I've run into you a couple of times on the streets of Tokyo, and I've seen you at work, and you use the word playful, and it's so true, because when people come by you and you take their photo, I think I actually heard you made a noise. You go sort of boop. And,
Sometimes, yeah.
and these people are smiling at you, and you talk to them, and they're not put off in any way, and you're not aggressive, you're not in people's face. It's sort of, you're more photographing as they walk by, and as you say, you have these interactions and you talk to them, and everyone's really, well, not everyone, but a lot of people in Japan are really friendly, polite, and they'll engage with you. And absolutely. So it's not, as you say, flash photography does get a bit of a bad rap, but it's the way you approach it, and it's the way that you take or present yourself on the street, that makes it different from what previous people have done in the past, I think, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely, like I said, a bit of a misunderstood style. But again, I think being in Japan is a bit of an anomaly to be in a lot of other places, because of the culture here. So I think that you can really just go out and like hammer it with the flash all night long, come back with like hundreds of photos, and you won't generally have many, if any, negative reactions. One thing I realized as well, because obviously, like a lot of people, you don't know. I don't think most people start photography and then grab a flash and go out and do that. They do other things first, and then kind of. The reason that I didn't use flash originally was because I didn't know how to. So I decided I'm going to teach myself, and then I just started really enjoying the look that I was getting, and the interactions I was having. I think it's so great that when you are out on the streets of Tokyo, meeting with all these people and shooting like this, that like I say, it's like one of the few places that you're not going to get into too much trouble for it, so it's quite nice.
That's true.
I just want to touch on one of the things you said there, and I'll ask a question, Jonny. It's interesting when you said it's people that you're not photographing always have something else to say. Should you be doing that? All the Karens in the world, should you be doing that? And that's male and female Karens. You know what I mean? And it's not often, very, very, very few occasions, it's actually the person you're photographing. It's always some mug at the back who's not being photographed, got something to say.
Exactly.
But touching on that, and you've just mentioned using a flash more and more and more, do you think you get a little bit more leeway because you're Western in Japan?
Absolutely. I think, because I've talked to Japanese friends, like you mentioned him in the intro, Yusuke, and although he actually does use flash, but he'll, by his own admission, will say, he'll have more issues than the Western friends out here. And a lot of the time it's just because people either don't want to be bothered trying to speak to somebody in English because maybe their English isn't good enough, and or it's just, they're just like, I can't be bothered. But actually, what's quite interesting, like I was saying, before I used flash and I just used to shoot street, one thing I've realised is that people will react how they'll react regardless of whether you shoot them with flash or you're not. You know what I mean? It's like, it's an individual thing. Like somebody, let's say you're not using the flash and you take a photo of somebody and you're kind of sneaking around. This old adage of like street photographers shouldn't be seen, that kind of thing. And we should just observe and like be in the shadows and stuff, which to me, I didn't like, firstly, because it made me feel like I was trying to like, I wasn't taking a photo, I was like stealing a photo. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It made me feel disingenuous. I'm trying to hide the fact that I'm taking it. So, but that's a separate thing. But yeah, this idea that, when you're taking photos of people, they will just react how they react. So they might see you taking a photo and they might think, they might find it funny, like, why are they taking a photo? Some people might just ignore you. Some people might get upset, It depends on the person. But what I found is like when I started shooting with flash, it's impossible to hide the fact you're taking a photo. I mean, I'm half a meter away with a flash in my hand, So and one of the good things is the 99% of the time when you do that, the first response is just a bit of surprise. Because all of a sudden, whatever thought they're having in their head, they're walking down thinking about what they're having for their teeth that night or whatever. And all of a sudden, it's like, what was that kind of thing? Something just happened. And then how you then respond. So for me, firstly, it's great because I'm not hiding the fact. But then how I respond to that, to them kind of snapping into this reality of someone's taking my photo, determines how they're going to feel about that situation. So if I all of a sudden just kind of, "Way, you look amazing. Oh, you're so great," and like I say, occasionally somebody might get a bit upset, like, "Why did you take that?" kind of thing. But it's great because I'm not hiding it. We can have a conversation, and I'm happy to delete it. I'm not precious about it, or I'm not out there trying to upset people. I'm out there just trying to have fun with this art form. But like I say, the way that you can then conduct yourself can really change how people think about what you've just done. And I'd say more often than not, my interactions are positive than anything else. It's first and foremost positive. Secondly, it's just completely like nonchalant. Just ignore you and just kind of walk on. And the very, very, very rare occasion somebody gets upset. And I'd say I had more people have an issue with me taking their photo when I didn't use flash than when I did, which I found really, really interesting. Now, maybe that's a Japan thing, though. So
someone said that to me yesterday on the streets of Melbourne. He uses flash too, and he said, I've had more negative responses when I haven't been using the flash, which is really interesting.
100%. Yeah. Because people think it's sneaky, because people are so skeptical of everybody else. They're so suspicious of everybody else today because society is kind of, taught them that, everybody's out to get theirs. And, it's just the way that we live in this divisive world today. So if they see someone take a photo and try and hide it, they think they're being sneaky. They're like, why have they done that? So, yeah. And like I said, for me, shooting like that, it just didn't, it wasn't my thing. And I think as well, like in Japan, in Tokyo particularly, like, because some places you go, there's you can get a bit more kind of creative with your framing and stuff. But if you're in Tokyo, it's just people. Like the main subject is people because they're everywhere. There's like a trillion people everywhere you look, especially in places like Shibuya, you know what I mean? So, it's like when you're out there with your camera, it's like you're constantly just shooting people. It's not like, I've tried doing stuff where it's a bit more kind of creative and, there's stuff like Alan Schaller kind of things, the kind of fine art style where it's just, one person with an umbrella walking down a flight of stairs. And you very rarely get that out here because there's 10,000 people going down those stairs. So the best thing to do, but the thing is, you look at a lot of people, you look at the Void Collective, Tatsu Suzuki, a lot of his stuff very up close, people, close to the camera kind of stuff, because that's what it's like out here. There's a trillion people everywhere, So you're just running around grabbing shots of people. So, flash work kind of works really well for that.
Jonny, you spoke about how you taught yourself to use flash on the street. So, and you're relatively new to photography. So who did you look up to when you got into photography? I mean, you live in Japan. You're surrounded by an incredible community of photographers over there.
Great.
So what was your introduction like? Who did you look up to and who did you take influence from?
I don't know really. Like, I guess because when I started, I knew nothing of the genre, I guess. And it wasn't until I started to get a little bit deeper into it that I started to kind of it was when I started to really get like, it wasn't just street photography, it was the art of photography that I got really into. And I remember like at the time I was shooting, I bought a Sony camera, John, like that, a Sony camera, and but I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. Yeah. And I ended up, I wanted a 35mm lens. I bought a 24 to 105, I think it was, that came with at the time. They were pushing that out, and I didn't know anything about lenses or really, at that point. Like I said, I'd done some bits years ago, but with my dad, but nothing really. So and I wanted a 35mm, and then I saw the X100F had come out. So I thought I'll get that instead of getting a 35mm, and just totally loved it. Fell in love with that camera. Like that was the camera, the Fuji X100F, that really kickstarted my passion for it, because it was this. It didn't feel like a tool. The Sony, I was just like bogged down in menus. It didn't really gel with it. Didn't like it. The images were great, but I just didn't like using it. And I think there's also the zoom lens wasn't my vibe, So I bought this X100F. Just totally fell in love with it. And then from there, I was like, I want to know how to make photos properly. Like, I want to know everything about it. So I thought, right, best thing I can do is go and buy the cheapest, most no frills film camera. So I bought a Pentax Spotmatic, all manual, learn about the exposure triangle, learn about that, actually how photography works really from the ground up. And it was during that time that I started to learn about what street photography was. And obviously, like a lot of things, you start with, if you're really into something, you go back to the history of it, and you learn about the masters and you study what they're doing. So I guess like a lot of people who are involved with street photography, if I were to think who are some of my, biggest influences initially, it was the same as everybody else. It was your Ernest Haas, the Saul Leiter, all these kind of guys. And then again, at the same time, didn't really know much about the flash photography at this point either. But yeah, I then started, you actually can't see them, just off to the side here. So, there's probably about 60 or 70 books that I've picked up in the last few years from Western and Asian street photographers. And yeah, so like I say, learning about those, learning about the history of the art form, then informed more about, my taste of what I like and what I didn't. And at the time, I wasn't, like I say, I wasn't crazy about flash photography. I really liked Fan Ho. He was somebody brilliant. I really liked Greg Girard as well. People that were kind of like nothing to do stylistically to how I do it, but people who I just guess took photos of just the world, in the mundaneness of the world, and presented it in such a beautiful way, were a lot of my big influences. And again, being part of the Tokyo kind of community and just the Tokyo style of shooting is what kind of got me more interested in flash and that up close thing. But yeah, Mark, interested when I met Mark on the street. The reason that I went and started chatting to him, because I saw he had a Fuji and a flash. It was a Fuji he had, wasn't it? Was it Expo 3?
Expo 3, yeah.
Yeah, Expo 3. I saw it because that's one of my favorite cameras of all time.
Oh, it's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I sold mine because I got a Leica instead. So I had to put the money towards that. But yeah, to this day, probably my favorite camera. And I saw you had that and got chatting to you. And
yeah.
You were about to go to lunch and I was about to go somewhere or for dinner. And I remember I was like, oh, let me get your Instagram. And I already followed you. I was just like, oh yeah, that's that guy. I know him. His work's amazing. So. But yeah, like I say, it's like, I don't think there's any, to me, apart from one or two people, like it's, I have influences. Everyone is good is my influence. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, do you know what? Can I make an admission here? I'm actually really jealous because, running into you on the streets of Tokyo, I think you're with Joe Greer and you're with
that's right, yeah.
Alex on streets, Alex
right.
Munoz, and a lot of other people, Nuts Tokyo, who we were talking about before. And I'm like, I'm so jealous of that scene that you've got there, because I know you do a lot of exhibitions and you probably catch up all the time, and there's obviously the Void Tokyo group there and Joel Pulliam, who we've had on the podcast, and it just seems to be such a rich, diverse, vibrant scene over there, and it sounds like you guys just have such a fun time catching up and photographing. Is that right? Or
yeah, I guess we're really lucky, that there's a lot of people here, and there's always people out all the time, and you're always running into people or meeting up with people, and what's good about it again is because it's a relatively safe place, and also somewhere where camera culture is huge, over here. So you're exposed to like the kind of cameras you see on the street. Because I'm just a total nerd when it comes to like gear. Like I collect them now myself, and the kind of stuff you see out here on the streets, you're just like, oh my god. You're seeing like the most incredible equipment, the most amazing people like running around. Everyone's running around with 30, 40 grand worth of gear in the middle of the night in a city. It's just, I don't know. There's not many places you can do that, I guess. So yeah, I love it.
So what made you change, like go to Leica? Like if you loved your Fuji and you got the X Pro 3, because I think when I was doing a bit of well, I don't have my Fuji cap on tonight. Not that I'm an ambassador, but I'm a fanboy.
One day you will be.
I don't care.
I believe.
They're not going to pay me, mate, because I know I'll talk about him anyway. So
yeah.
I just like,
why bother? He already does it.
He already does it for now. We're not going to pay him. Yeah. But so you loved your, you started on your X100. What was it? Sorry, V, and then you moved to
F. It was the F.
F. Sorry, and then you moved to the X Pro 3, and now you've moved to the Leica world. Why? Yeah. If you were happy with the Fuji, look, I'm not judging. I'm just asking.
No, of course, why, of course. I mean, partly yes. Like I say, because I'm somebody who's likes to collect things. For me, it's like the objects. I have as much enjoyment out of the actual items as I do actually going out and use them. Again, opposite to what my dad would say, just like it's a tool. To me, they're not. They're these beautiful machines that I get a lot of joy using. But again, and I think a lot of it at the time was, again, sort of as I started looking at some of these old masters who were all shooting back in the day with, M6, M3s and stuff like that. And again, for me, it was like, if they could go out and do this incredible work with it, then if I can do something even close to that using the same equipment, that would be amazing. Because today, like modern digital cameras are a cheat code. They do everything for you. If you buy the latest Sony and you can't take good photos with it, then you should maybe give it up, because that camera is designed to make it like almost like idiot proof to be able to take good photos. It will do all your focusing, all your exposure, everything you need. You can crop in 100% on these things. If you go and get an old manual film camera and you can take good photos, then that's down to you and your skill. And I think for me, what I loved about the Fuji initially, from going from the Sony, was that it was fun. I loved the manual controls. I loved the tactile approach to how you're using it. It felt connected. What I didn't like about the Fuji, because at the time as well, I was doing like little YouTube videos and stuff, and shooting a lot of late night stuff. And what I didn't like about the Fuji, the X Pro 3, was the video capabilities on it weren't the best. The weatherproofing wasn't the best, unless you use like the F2, the Fujicron lenses. They're the only ones that were weatherproofed at the time. The low light performance wasn't the best, and that I do nighttime mainly, kind of thing. So, I wanted to look into what other options are, because I wanted to try full frame, and so I ended up getting an M10. An M10R, I think it was, and yeah, I mean, that definitely improved the image quality was fantastic, but then you don't have the video and stuff, but you do have, because when I had that, it's like that. What I loved about the Fuji in terms of the fun, that this thing that makes you want to go out and shoot. I never took the Fuji after that, because I'd want to pick up the M. You feel so connected with it, And so now, interestingly enough, I've actually gone back and I've got Sony now as well. So I've got Sony and Leica. But there's reason for this. The reason that I did this, and to me, it kind of makes sense, because different cameras for different situations is how I liked. If my M cameras are like, if I just want to go out and enjoy taking photos, just it's my carry about everywhere I go. But let's say it's absolutely chucking it down, then I can take a Sony. Let's say I'm going to an event, like a dancing event in Tokyo, for example, where they have all the performers and dancers. I can take a Sony, I can use that autofocus, and I can use the if I need to crop, I can crop and all that kind of stuff. So, and also for video, Sony is great. So for me, it's like I've got this tool which does an amazing job, and also because a lot of the stuff that I do is really, really close. One of the image that I shot that won the Smithsonian competition, that was 14mm lens from about 30 centimeters away.
Yeah.
You can't do that with an M. It's impossible because it won't focus that close. So again, it's like what I love about the M. It is everything that it does, but also its restrictions, because it forces you to shoot a certain way. But sometimes you want to shoot outside of those restrictions. So that's why I've got both.
That's perfectly fine. You don't, because everyone knows how I feel about something. But look, they've said it time and time again. It's a bit of a running gag.
Yeah,
I just find them utterly soulless. They take
absolutely.
They take amazing images. They're great at night. They're full frame. They're solid cameras. But geez, it's just nothing about that for me that wants to pick it up and go and photograph.
No,
it's
autofocus.
Totally eye tracking. It'll track an eye from 5 kilometers away. You know what I mean? And a train will go by, and it'll still pick up the eye afterwards, and all this stuff.
Yeah. They get back home, they wake up, and they're like, "Why is it so high?" It's just only focus.
Nothing can touch them.
Yeah.
But
no, exactly.
That doesn't make it a tool that you want to pick up and do what we want to do. I think commercially. Knock your socks off, you know what I mean? But to do what we want to do.
I think it's like if it came to okay, I can only choose one or the other, the Sony would be gone. I'd stick with the M for sure. And I've got a Q2 as well. I'd be happy with those. But like I say, it's like because I'm just stupid, financially.
So basically, what you're saying is you'll take the Sony if you're in a situation where it's going to get destroyed. You take
basically,
the Sony.
Yeah. For sure.
It's the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah. But no, like I say, I'm just lucky that I'm, in that situation. And but like I say, it's there for a purpose. I've realised what I want to use it for, and outside of that, I don't want to use it for anything else.
Bang on.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the shot you got on your destructible Sony. Is this the pink beanie shot that? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that shot. That's
when I came across you. I saw that shot and went, "Holy camole, man! That is awesome."
Yeah, it's so good. And while you're telling us about that shot, how do you feel about entering competitions these days? Because John and I have had a bit of a disagreement in the past, but what are your thoughts?
It's a vanity thing, really, isn't it? I'll tell you what it is, okay? Because for one, I don't like the fact that competitions are pay to play. Like I hate that, and the same with actually a lot of exhibitions. They're kind of the same thing. They're these vanity things, really. But yeah, so I don't like the fact that they're pay to play. And really, ultimately, what does it mean? Is it just some bragging rights or whatever? I don't know. What does it mean? You enter a competition. Let's say you win or you place in there. It makes you feel good. It gives you some kind of validation. You can kind of say, "I'm this." But really, to me, it came down to it's perspective on things. For example, let's say I felt like I had a body of work that I wanted to exhibit or publish in the future. Because it is fun to do these things. Let's say I contacted a publisher and said, "I'm a street photographer from Tokyo." They might say, "All right, you and everybody else." If I turn around and I say, I'm an award-winning street photographer from Tokyo. Oh, okay, that sounds quite interesting. If I say I'm an international exhibitor, award-winning street photographer from Tokyo, okay, yeah, we might be interested in talking to you then. So I think a lot of it's just perception things. Ultimately, it's kind of meaningless unless that's something you crave. It's like a blue tick on Twitter. Do you know what I mean? Some people just want that thing. Do you know what I mean? But really, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
But it is also a perception thing. It's kind of like and I hate I hate how popular Instagram's got now for photography. But it's the same with Instagram numbers. It's a perception thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember talking to Luvu, who's a friend of mine in Tokyo. Did you meet Luvu when you were over here?
I
Filmed
don't
by
think
Luvu. So. Next time, he's a cool guy. But again, he was saying, he's got about 20K followers or so on Instagram, and he was just saying ages ago, I think it was him, but he was saying the same thing about it's strange how differently people deal with you. You know.
Yeah.
And again, I met a guy called Timus, and he's you know that guy. He's really cool guy. Went for dinner with him out here, and he's got 1 million plus followers. And I remember saying to him at the time, I was like, "Yeah, but what does it mean? I mean, how does it equate to your life? I mean, how's it been good for you? Doing this because a lot of it's off the back of reels for him, And he said it's been great. And he said, and the main thing is, he's like, I can talk to anybody, Like he can contact anybody and he can talk to them. because of the perception of, this guy must be something, it's just part of the world we live in. I don't like it. It's just kind of how it is. And I think that exhibitions, although I wouldn't put them in the same bracket as Instagram kind of stuff, but I think that a lot of it just, for me, kind of comes down to, perception more than anything, But ultimately, you can do it or don't do it. Doesn't really matter.
So speaking of exhibitions, Johnny, we're going to Tadashi Onishi. I'm probably just bastardized his poor name. You know what I mean?
You got it right. Okay. Tadashi
Onishi. He's doing Russo project, yeah. And Mark and I are part of that project here because we're going to have an offshot in Australia because some of the lads have organised it, which is great, and we're going to be part of it. Is that something that you would get involved in, Johnny? Because I'm looking at it because he's also linking music and stuff with the images as well.
If I've met him quite a few times, and he's a great guy, to be honest with you, and a very incredible photographer, and does a lot for the awareness of street photography in Tokyo, and awareness of it as an art form. If he asked me, I'd love to get involved. I'm not going to impose myself to go as far as say I should do this kind of thing. I want to do this. If he felt that it was right for what he wanted to do there, I would certainly love to get involved. I think it's just it's an interesting thing, that he's doing with the projections. And I've been to a few of them, and they're cool. They're just like little hangouts,
Yeah.
So, lots of people kind of hanging out and, it's good.
Because it is going around the globe now. I think it's in Hong Kong, Singapore. He's mentioned that,
it's awesome.
There's tons of places, Australia, we're doing it here in Sydney. Like I said, Mark and I are part of it. And he's also linking it with music, isn't that? And I just thought that would be, after doing a bit of a background check on you and realising you're a DJ, what would stop you from reaching out and saying, hey, I'm an award-winning photographer in Tokyo. And getting involved, because I think there's lots of people getting involved now. There's different parts of provinces, I don't know if that's the right word, provinces in Japan that are doing it as well, that he's branching out. It's starting to go in different areas.
I think, Tadashi's, like I say, I've met him quite a few times. We've, hung out on nights out and whatever. So if he would like me to be involved, I'm sure he'd ask,
Right, okay.
And I in the meantime, I just kind of keep focusing on just trying to get better at what I'm doing, really. That's the main thing, I've realized as well, like recently I've done a couple of exhibitions and group shows. And again, it's just, I recommend for people to do them. Exhibitions, because I think for one it's a different thing seeing your work. Again, it is, like I say, it's you have to have expectation on what you're actually going to get out of it, because it's just going to cost you money and time. Lots of money, lots of time, and if you do it thinking I'm going to do this, I'm going to sell loads of work, I'm going to make all my money back, you're probably going to end up being very disappointed. If you look at it as part of a creative journey that you're on, photography was never meant to be viewed on a phone, for one. It was meant to be printed, and there's something very magical about when you actually see your work printed. Group shows are a great way to get started because it takes the pressure off you, and it means that you don't have to have necessarily a fully formed idea. You can just be like, here's some images that I like. Same with zines instead of books. I think your zine should be like your mixtape. Your book should be your first album. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
But I think with doing these group shows, I've done a couple of them now. And what I found quite interesting is from doing the first to the second, it started to really influence like what I wanted to do long-term project-wise, how I wanted to go about, what was the point of doing these photos? Because this kind of style of photography that I do, it's not the kind of thing that people are going to want to buy prints of, for example, They don't want pictures of like strangers on the walls, even if it looks a nice photo, it's like, it's not, it would probably do well as a book, but for me, I think it's more about exhibiting it, creating these more immersive exhibitions, more on bigger scales and things like that, more grander exhibitions, trying to do things exhibited in a way that hasn't really been done before, at least not to, in my knowledge, or the things that I would like to do. And I think that by doing these things, exhibitions, competitions and things like that, it's like, although like I was saying before, it doesn't really mean anything, it can give you the impetus to experiment more it can give you a sense of validation from other people, which sometimes is what people do need, because often we're our worst critic, aren't we? I suffer a bit from that. What do they call it? That imposter syndrome. Yeah,
I think we all do.
Yeah, of course. The best people do. The best people, I think, conduct themselves with some sort of humility and don't just go, "This is my thing, isn't it great?" They kind of look at it and go, "This is good." Because I remember actually when I made my first scene and somebody bought it, and I said, and was talking to him, I said, "Yeah, hopefully this is the worst stuff I'm ever going to make."
Yeah.
Because I want to I want to keep improving. I look at it, it's like, oh, it's not that great. It's like, and they're like, "We love it. It's brilliant." I'm just like, oh. I want to be better. I want to try harder. I want to learn more, And I think that, like I say, doing these things is, for me, it is definitely, it's kind of pointless, and also there's a point to it at the same time. It all depends on your motives and what you want there, your expectations, I think. So, so I was getting a bit ADHD on it all again.
Jonny, no, it's really interesting because we're obviously talking about exhibitions, and you've done your zine. So, do you have any goals in mind? Like, are you working towards something? Are you creating a body of work that you think will be a book one day? Or
yeah, for sure. Like, I think for one, now this style of this kind of like very up close. This latest exhibition I did, it was part of a group show. I titled my section of that what I exhibited, which was 84 prints, and a lot of them had been taken literally the week before. Like. I just got the Q2 monochrome at the time, and I went out and took a load of these photos a couple of weeks before, exhibited them there. And one of the most common things I hear from people is bikurishita, which basically is Japanese for, it's like, I'm surprised, and it's kind of like when somebody's like shocked, bikurishita. So I titled the exhibition Bikurishita.
Okay.
It's like bikurishita, basically, is how it's pronounced. And then how? Sorry, my wife's Japanese. She was just like next to me. Was it my pronunciation? Yeah. Oh, yeah. She was like that.
Just quickly, do you speak Japanese, Jonny?
A little bit, squashy. 日本語を勉強します。日本語でもっと難しい。Yeah, not enough. I need to.
Your wife's going there like, no,
yeah. But yeah. So this exhibition Bikurishita. What I decided I'd do, because again, like I was saying, I realized, I thought I'm not going to sell any of this work. So what I decided I was going to do was, after the exhibition, take all the images down, get them made into a book, and then just give the book away as like a little gift to someone, which next week, actually, I'm going to choose who it is, like just from a random number generator, But doing that show and then exhibiting it in this, I kind of created this like cove of like 3 walls, and I had these 80 images. So when you walked into them, they were just everywhere surrounding you. And that kind of got me thinking about, okay, what can I do with this as a project long term? So I want to basically do a much bigger version of this, much more intense when you go to see it. And so that's one project I'm working on, and I want to do that in Tokyo and in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And it's just now it's like, okay, well, I've got an idea and I want to spend the next year gathering the work for it, but then I need to figure out how I pay for it, so because it'd be much more expensive. So it's whether I try going for funding or whether I try and self-fund it, or just try and maybe contact brands and stuff like that, or whatever, but so there's that, and that would accompany a book basically. So that's one project I'm doing. But then I also have the work. I have probably enough work for a book on Hong Kong I want to call it Hajimete no Hong Kong, which basically means like my first time in Hong Kong. And that would just probably be a self-published thing where, in Hong Kong for a week. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's absolutely incredible. For me, I think it just blows Tokyo out of the water for street photography, because this city is just, it's just incredible, architecturally. And also, I mentioned before, like Greg Girard and Fan Ho, 2 of my favorites, but they did a lot of work over there. So yeah, that's another project. So yeah, I've got a few other ideas as well. So
Jonny, I just want to touch on, we're coming near the end of the podcast, but I want to ask you a question because it interests me a lot. And I got asked this question. I didn't know how to answer it. Now, you said like when you release your zine, it's like your mixtape. But then when you release your album, your book, sorry, it's like your album. And then you said, we're quite humble and we've got imposter syndrome, etc. But how do you know when you've got enough good images to say that you're good enough to put into a book? You know, when you said like
No.
the zene's like people, you were like, that's my worst lot of images I hope to take. How are you going to gauge yourself to know that you're a better photographer?
I don't know really. I think.
Will you ever get there?
well, I think as long as you feel like you're still getting better, that's the main thing. But ultimately, I think, and I've talked to people about this before about just doing it really, because I say, I thought doing my first scene. I look back at it now, there's loads of change, but if I didn't do that, I wouldn't know that. And I always say to people, look, 80% good enough is better than 100% perfection of nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got to just do these things, and like by doing them, and it's the same with exhibiting, and it's the same with entering competitions. All these things, if that's what you want to do, then just do it, and don't worry about don't have expectation of what it's going to be at that time. The process of doing it is going to teach you so much about what you've just done. And like where you can go from there, how you can improve that kind of thing. And so I think the difference again between a zine and a book, I think a book has to be sort of more thematic. There needs to be, some sort of thread that runs through it, whereas I think a zine will be something that it can just be a bit more higgledy-piggledy, just photos of whatever really. Yeah. And I think so with a book, I think the time when you're ready to do a book is when you are looking at your work and you go, there's enough of a thing here that if I were to present this, it will, make sense. And also you have to remember that when you go and look at photo books, go and have a look at all the photo books that are in the shops today, half of them are garbage, to me. They're not, they might not be, they might be amazing to somebody else, but to me, they're garbage. So I look at this stuff and I'm like, some of my work's better than that, but that's my eye towards it. Do you know what I mean? That's how I see. Yeah. That's how I see the world and my interests and stuff. So you just remember that, for most people, their work probably is good enough to do all this stuff. It's just kind of taking that little leap, And then once you do it one time, you're like, oh, okay, I can do this better.
Yeah, definitely.
So just have the balls, basically, is what you're saying, Johnny.
For sure, just life's too short. Yeah,
put yourself out there.
Life's too short, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And photos on a hard drive are just ones and zeros on a computer.
That's right.
Very wise advice, Johnny.
Yeah.
Good to have your opinion on that.
And
thank you.
As John said, we are coming up to a lot of time with you, but I just want to squeeze in just a quick question. We're talking about your dad at the start and how he's a commercial photographer. Do you now have is your dad sort of proud of what you're doing, and do you have conversations about him with him about your work, and he must just look at you and go, it's great that you sort of share this this passion.
Yeah, for sure. He loves it. It's something that we can definitely bond and talk about. And interestingly, he never owned a Leica. He always wanted one. So when he came to visit with his wife to Japan for the first time a couple of months ago, and I was just like, hey, take this. Gave him a Leica, and he had the time of his life. He loves it. He loves it, and it's like something to bond on. Although I had to tell him off a couple of times because he had back in the day, he had Hasselblads, and he had Mamiya RB67, so all the studio gear. And I said to him, I was like, whatever happened to that Hasselblad you had back in the day? And he was like, oh, I just gave it to some client, friend of mine. And I was like, you what? And he was like, yeah, but you don't understand, it was worthless at the time, It was during the transition from film to digital.
Yeah.
And the other thing he was telling me, he said, like, we was in New York years and years ago, probably in the 70s. And he saw this. He was at the shop and he saw this Leica camera in the shop window, and it was a box set. I don't know what it was, but it's probably like an M3, and it came with a couple of lenses. Yeah, and it was just a box set of this Leica camera. And it's a few $1,000s, and he thought, I'm going to get that. So he said, but I need to use a cashier's check. So he said, I can't do it today. I'm going to go back tomorrow, and I'll buy that. And then the next day he went back, and the shop was closed. And then the following day he had to fly back. Wow. So he kind of always had this regret. And I was thinking, can you imagine like a box set Leica from the 70s? What that would be worth today?
Oh, man.
I was like, Dad, you're an idiot. You should have got it, and you shouldn't have given those stuff away.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, though, Johnny. Hindsight. If I had hindsight 30 years ago, I'd be a rich man.
Oh, I'd have bought all those Pokemon cards, that's for sure.
Who knew?
Yeah, I know.
Well, Johnny, we're coming to the end of our allotted time, but we always ask one question, and if you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know what's coming. If you could, so hopefully you've had time to think about this, because some people go, I don't know. But we're hoping that you're a man of the world and you'll have thought about this. If you could go one place in the world, Johnny, to photograph, where would it be? Sydney.
Melbourne. No, you're right. I did think about this.
Good.
And it would be, for me, North Korea, because I just think it would be insane.
Nice knowing you.
Yeah. North Korea with a letter of guarantee from Kim himself saying you can shoot what you want and do what you want. Other than that, I don't want to go. But just imagine how that must be to get over there. There's nowhere like it in the world. So
100%. I'm with you, Johnny. I'll come with you. Yeah, that's awesome.
For sure.
It was nice knowing both of you. And you know what? If it says you can shoot anything, right, you've got to read the fine print. If it's in Korean, it'll be, but we'll shoot back and you'll be dead. Literally, you know what I mean?
Maybe I won't go to North Korea.
That's amazing, because it would be like going back in time.
Yeah,
it'd be like having a time machine.
There'd be nothing else like it,
Yeah, nothing.
So I think that would be somewhere that would be an experience to you'd never forget.
Well, no,
so many places.
Quite seriously, like I'd love to go too, and you got to take precautions, and you obviously got to be with a guide and do all that, and that poor lad who stole the flag, and all that. But it's it'd be a fascinating place to go.
Yeah. Like I say, even if you had to do it, well, you would have to do it through the full, the legitimate, way that, but even that I'm sure would be an incredible experience.
I think so too. Wow. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. So there you go, North Korea, and it's not far from me.
No, it's
I could probably swim.
We should all go over there and start North Korean SPC or something.
Yeah. Do a Rosu project over there. I'll mention it to Deshi when I see him next.
You post your first 3 photos on Instagram and be like, gone.
Yeah.
You'd be like in camp.
Oh, boy.
And it wouldn't be Butlins, mate. You know what I mean?
Oh, God. To be honest, that'd probably be worse. I don't know if you've ever been to Butlins.
I have. We went to Butlins as a kid.
Too.
High. Anyway, yeah. Well, Johnny, thanks ever so much for joining us. Thanks for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
It's been great talking to you and hearing your opinion.
Waffle on a bit and lose track of things, but my mind gets a bit wild at times.
It's good. I went and made a cup of tea and had my dinner, Johnny. It was great.
Yeah. Me too, actually. I don't know. I managed that.
No, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope I run into you on the streets of Tokyo again, because that was a fun night. Yeah, so it was.
Well, again, same to you, John, man. Like, if you ever do get a chance to get out here, Mark, again, and anyone actually, if they ever get out here, just give us a shout. There's a great community of people. We're always out and about. We love to meet up and share our enjoyment for this amazing city and this amazing place. So if anyone ever comes out here, come and check it out.
Thanks,
nice
John.
one. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed myself talking about myself.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Nice one.